Welcome to our presentation on the Exodus encounter. We're going to present proof that we possess the original text of the book of Exodus in this video. My name is Gioacchino Michael Cascione. I'm the author of Repetition the Bible. It's edited by David Kuski, Robert Doggett, Rolf Preuss. The book is available through these sources: RedeemerPress.org, Amazon, Northwestern Publishing House, CN News, or you can write to this address or this number. The introduction now for this video: the primary goal is to prove that we possess the original text of Exodus or any other book by Moses. This will be achieved by proving that we have the original text because we possess the original and complete Hebraic meter in the text. If we have the complete meter, then we must have the original text. Exodus is the account of God liberating 3 million slaves who then formed their own nation. Exodus chronicles, number 1, the birth of Moses. Number 2, the 10 plagues. 3, escape from Egypt. 4, destruction of Pharaoh's army. 5, the Hebrew nation's encounter with God in the desert. 6, the 10 commandments that changed the world. And the completion of the tabernacle, an event unrivaled, all these events unrivaled in the history of the world. Now, half of the book of Exodus is dedicated to this one particular event: the construction of the tabernacle, God's presence with his people on earth, his chosen people. Exodus contrasts Egyptian rulers who built pyramids as the gateway to the gods versus slaves who meet God on a mount in the desert. Exodus contrasts the legacy of stone temples versus scrolls in a box. Exodus contrasts magnificent tombs of the dead versus a tent inhabited by the eternal God. And the fourth point here: the mysteries of the Egyptian monuments versus the mysteries of words in the text. After 3,500 years, the mystic scrolls of the Ark of the Covenant have more secrets to reveal. We thought we had all this information, we have a good understanding of it, but there's always more to learn, and it keeps revealing more and more as time progresses. We now find that Exodus is written with an intricate Hebraic meter that's been woven into the fabric of the text. The meter draws attention to an array of obscure words and phrases found in the first 300 skip-over pages. You know, the parts that we don't look at too carefully? In the front there in Exodus and Leviticus and Numbers and parts of Deuteronomy, we call those the skip-over pages, so we just kind of keep on going. However, much of this meter is found right there. As with any other artifact, the meter has got to be seen. In other words, if we say the meter is there, what's it look like? Show it to us. Well, that's what we're going to do in this video. So this video is the viewer's encounter, your own encounter with Exodus. Examples of a Hebraic meter in this video have also been color-coded according to the JEPD documentary hypothesis. Let me explain that. Every major university in the world right now and most seminaries teach that the first 5 books of the Bible were written not by Moses, but by 4 different groups of writers over a period of about 500 years. And they call this JPD, and it's a hoax. The hoax is that 4 tribal sources invented by scholars, by the way. The scholar just said this is how it is, but they can't prove how it is, but this is what they say. They say 4 tribal sources known as Yahwehs, who supposedly were first writing about what we call the Bible in 950 BC, and then the Elohists in 850 BC, and the Deuteronomists in 600 BC, and the priestly code in 500 BC. It's claimed that these 4 different groups all had 4 different documents that were all then collated, put together by an unknown redactor. We'll call him Redactor X. So they turned the Bible into 4 suits of cards shuffled into one deck by a dealer, or we could say by the redactor. And they call this the documentary hypothesis. So if you got JEPD, and then we'll just take all these cards here, shuffle them in one deck, arrange them, and then the redactor is the one who says, look what I came up with, 5 books of the Bible, I put them all together. Now we're going to color code this supposed writing according to the 4 sources. So we've got the Yahwehs, that'll be in purple, and then the Elohists will be green, and the priestly code will be yellow, and I've got 2 for the Deuterists or Deuteronomists, 2 shades of gray. Redactor is red, and other, that's the group that they don't know who that is, but he just kind of showed up in the text. Other comes through, well, that's blue, and then the Friedman error will be this color here. Now, the Friedman error is a reference to the individual, a well-known Harvard-trained PhD, Dr. Richard Elliott Friedman, who wrote his famous book in 1987, and it's titled Who Wrote the Bible? And Friedman then divides up the entire 5 books of the Bible and into various sections, and color codes, and gives all the verses in his book. If you have the book, you can see who wrote what. And if we apply this color coding to Genesis, Exodus, Leviticus, and Numbers, we have what looks like a giant UPC code that you find in the back of a Campbell's soup can or any other grocery store product. And so you'd have all these different strands that the so-called redactor put together. Now, this video is divided into 5 sections. We've just covered part 1, the introduction. Now, there are so many other examples that it's necessary to move rather quickly. We can't cover all the examples we have to prove that there's Hebraic meter without moving rather quickly. Therefore, viewers who want to take and study what you're seeing with a little more care, just freeze what you're seeing on your computer screen, freeze it, take a look, take a screenshot, whatever, and then we're going to proceed through these sections. Introduction we've already covered. Then there will be Heptadic meter, that's repetitions of 7. Decadal meter, repetitions of 10. Dodecadal meter, that's repetitions of 12. And then compound meter, which is a combination of all of these. The examples in this video were gathered by following the theory of the brilliant Florentine rabbi, who then later became the archivist for Semitic scrolls of the Vatican in 1925, and that would be Umberto Cassuto. He began writing his commentaries then when he escaped to Israel after the Nazis had taken over, and he was run out by everything connected with World War II, and he escaped with his life, moved to Israel, and then began to write his commentaries. And that's when he writes about repetitions of 7s, 10s, and 12s. He didn't have a computer. He couldn't go as far as we're going to go now today. He proposed a theory which seems and appears to be exactly correct, especially when it keeps producing more data. Cassuto's evidence leads to the conclusion that we can really never know how the Bible was assembled other than we do have the original text, and therefore we know this because we have the original meter in the text. Credit should also be given to Alexander Gendler, publisher of Varda Books in Skokie, Illinois, a Chicago suburb. It was Gendler who, when presented with the data, suggested that this writer compare the data with the documentary hypothesis. It was his idea. He said, why don't you compare the color coding according to Friedman and see how it matches up with the various supposed authors invented by scholars. If something is a solid color, that means they called it right. But if you see different colors in the same example of meter, multiple colors, that means the whole theory is completely debunked. And that's our goal here now. Now we're looking at heptadic meter, repetition in sevens. This is the beginning of the color coding. Hardened the heart of Pharaoh 7 times in Exodus. Let's explain this initial example here. This phrase, harden the heart of Pharaoh, appears exactly 7 times in the book of Exodus. Actually, the entire Pentateuch, all 5 books, it appears exactly 7 times. And here you see the Hebrew. We're going to provide that for any critic who wants to take a look and carefully examine this. And here you see all the phrasing, and here we see it's supposedly, when the meter breaks out, it's supposedly written by the Yahwehs, and then here we have the priestly code, and here we have the redactor. He writes 3, and then the priestly code. Well, now we've got 3 different groups out of the documentary hypothesis all contributing, which is utterly impossible, which means there never really was anything like JEPD. It didn't really happen, because how could these different writers all contribute to the same set of meter that's in heptadic meter, or repetitions of 7? We're going to show many examples of this right now. Here we have a second example, Moses' father-in-law, 7 times in Exodus. That appears exactly 7 times in heptadic meter. And then beneath that, all wise-hearted. That phrase, notice, these are in solid colors, and so it's not too difficult to say that the Exodus example there is in a solid color, supposedly written by this group we're talking about here. It's not so surprising that it's all supposedly written by Elois, that is up here in the green, Moses' father. That's all the same chapter, but it's in there 7 times. And then much of what is called the priestly code, any directions in Exodus or Leviticus, as these are all from Exodus, are always marked in yellow. But even though they marked them in yellow, the people who decided, that is the proponents of the documentary hypothesis, had no idea that there were repetitions of 7 heptadic meter going on inside the work of the so-called priestly code. Here we see this phrase, all wise-hearted, exactly 7 times. And here we have murmur against. Here we have, look at that unusual split. And all the people murmured against Moses, exactly 7 times up there at the top. If you see that, all the people murmured, and the whole congregation of Israel and so forth. You see that Exodus 15:24, and the next verse 6:22, the whole congregation of Israel murmured against Moses and Aaron. And then look at that last example here in the green, and the people murmured against Moses. That phrasing, murmur against, appears exactly 7 times. The names of the sons of Israel. That phrase, the names of the sons of Israel, appears exactly 7 times. Once in Genesis, and then in Exodus, supposedly written by the priestly code, and then 7 more. I should say, supposedly written by the redactor in red, and then the rest of it by the priestly code. Well, that's utterly impossible. They're supposed to be spread out by hundreds of years. They couldn't possibly have had contact with each other, but look at them all contributing to the same meter. And now we're going a little further. Drive out before thee. This phrase, drive out before thee, 7 times in the Pentateuch. Again, look at the spread on the Elois versus the Yahwehs, and then you see the gray there, the Deuteris, and all involved in drive out before thee exactly 7 times. The little asterisk there is part of the verse was removed so that we could fit it into the example because of a line wrap. A stiff-necked people. Look at that spread. 7 times. Repeats 7 times. And we've got Elois and Yahwehs, and then look at other appearing right there. Here we have Sabbath rest 7 times, all in the directions for the Sabbath. Anything connected with the exercise, practice, rubrics, regulations of the religion is supposedly written by the priestly code. And of course, if they mark it all yellow, it's always going to come up all in yellow. And here we see it's solid yellow. Here we have Passover to the Lord. And here Passover is priestly code. And the redactor contributed, and then other. But it spreads out in 4 different books: Exodus, Leviticus, Numbers, Deuteronomy. Now we're looking at establishment. I should say establish my covenant 7 times in the Pentateuch. Again, 6 of them, you can see there in yellow, are appearing in Genesis, 3 in Genesis, and then I should say 4 in Genesis, and 1 in Exodus, and the last one Leviticus, and the first one is supposedly written by a Yahwist who knew that the priestly code was going to come along later on and contribute as well, which is utterly bizarre, but notice it appears 7 times. The first offspring of the womb. Again, I'm not going to name each of these color codings. You can see it for yourself. The first offspring of the womb appears exactly 7 times. And Moses went up. Notice that phrase appears 7 times, and we've got 3 different contributors supposed to this event. It spreads across 2 different books of the Bible. All this meter is moving through Exodus. As I said, we're doing a detailed examination of meter, Hebraic meter, in the book of Exodus. A feast of, or a feast to the Lord, 7 times. And look at that spread again, appearing as you see it. Here we have, call the name of the Lord 7 times, mostly by the Yahwists, 2, you can see the contributions in green, by the Elohists, and they're all contributing. How can they all contribute to the same meter? They can't. That's because there was only one author, and the author says his name is Moses. This couldn't be coordinated by these different groups, and then the redactor who contributes to the different groups, and they're all contributing to the same meter. Before the Lord perpetually, 7 times. Look at that last phrase. It comes up in Deuteronomy. The Deuterists contributed to the priestly code, supposedly. Before the Lord, again, 7 times. I'm going to back up and we'll have a closer look at this. You see the phrase there. We've enlarged it, and then we're moving over here. And then you'll see we couldn't enlarge it here because the same phrase in a different format in Hebrew, we needed more space to put all the words on this screen here. Before the Lord, I'm backing up again here, and this is before the Lord perpetually. So we have 2 different phrases, quite similar, but not the same, each appearing 7 times each. This one here has quite a contribution. The only missing on this group is the priestly code. Here we have a wave offering before the Lord, 14 times, double heptadic meter. Here we have 40 days, 14 times in the Pentateuch, 40 days and 40 nights, 10 times in the Pentateuch. And I have an asterisk there. It depends if we examine one more example from the Septuagint. If we're going to add the phrase "and 40 nights," and then 40 days and 40 nights 7 times, speaking of Moses. In other words, Moses is involved in that. So we have these 3 different groups. We've got double heptadic here, and then decadal here, and then single heptadic, all intertwined in the same section. And the contribution you can see here is all by these different writers. We've got the Yahwists, priestly code, and the Deuterists. And they're not paying attention to who goes first or second, are they? Look how they splice into each other. The elders of Israel, exactly 14 times, double heptadic meter. How is the writer able to coordinate all this? This is astonishing amount of repetition, all coordinated throughout the entire Pentateuch. Shekels after the shekel of the sanctuary. That phrase, that's a instructional term for worship in at the tabernacle, and one phrase, or I should say two phrases, appear at the top in Exodus, and the rest are all in Numbers, and so it appears exactly 14 times. One curtain or curtains 14 times. The continual burnt offering. All of this supposedly written by the redactor. He wrote his own meter. Not only is he contributing to the meter, supposedly, then he goes off and writes his own as well. The glory of the Lord 14 times in the Pentateuch. The glory of the Lord, no prefix, 10 times. The glory of the Lord 7 times. So I've got heptadic, double heptadic, and decadal, all again in the same example. I'm going to back up on that one again. I found this one particularly interesting because it's an image of God, the glory of the Lord, as he is presented in the Pentateuch exactly 14 times as how we're supposed to think about him. Outside the camp, that means outside the camp of Israel there in the Sinai desert, there we have this spread, priestly code, and the Elohis and other at the bottom, all contributing to 28 times. Quadruple Heptadic Meter. Now we're switching to Decadal Meter, 10 times. Here you see Decadal Meter repeating 10 times on Mount Sinai, the Sinai desert. Mount Sinai repeats exactly 10 times in the book of Exodus. The Ark of the Testimony 10 times in Exodus. The children of Israel saying 10 times in the Pentateuch. Now, you've noticed that as long as the meter touches Exodus, it's included in this presentation. There are many more examples that could be presented that are not found in Exodus, but anything connected with meter that is either exclusive to Exodus or either is a meter running through Exodus and is either touching part of Genesis or Deuteronomy or Numbers, Leviticus, is selected for this presentation. Here we see, again, Exodus one time, and then we've got the others from Leviticus and Numbers. It shall be the statute forever throughout your generations. That's a rather long one. That phrase repeats 10 times. And then there are 7 in a subset that add the phrase in all your dwellings. So notice that they're in bold type there. So we have 10 times the phrase, it shall be the statute forever throughout your generations. And then there are 3 more in all your dwellings. So we have 3 within all your dwellings and 7 without, a total of 10. Notice the redactor's contribution at just the right places. And the Lord to make atonement 10 times in the Pentateuch. To keep the Passover 10 times in the Pentateuch. All these words, or same as the word thing, depending how they translate it, all these things or all these words is the same Hebrew, 10 times in the Pentateuch. Look at the spread on that. It's what a scramble of supposed imaginary writers who all contributed to this phrase. I think this particular example contains all of them. I think I'm seeing all of the colors here. Every example is here, except the Friedman error is present in this example. Oh wait, no, we're also missing the redactor. The redactor didn't get involved in this one, supposedly. Which the Lord your God gives you 30 times. And inside that, look at the letters to the left, the land, and you see the land comes up 7 times. So we have land to the left 7 times, which the Lord your God gives you, and then adds the phrase, land which the Lord your God gives you, 7 times inside the 30 repetitions. So there it is in Hebrew. And obviously, you can, for those who don't read Hebrew, you can tell that it all flips on the other side, where you see the phrase, the land, it's on the right side now. All the firstborn in Egypt, I should say all the firstborn in Exodus, here it is exactly 10 times. That phrase, all the firstborn, 10 times. Stretch out 10 times, and then your hand 7 times. So we get stretch out, and then stretch out your hand, all combined. And underneath that it says a statute forever 10 times. In the Pentateuch we have 2 of them, the same example. Delivered out of the hand 10 times. Again, look at that spread. That phrase repeats 10 times. It's in Genesis, Exodus, Numbers, and Deuteronomy. And God saw, that phrase 10 times, and God saw it was good 7 times. And there you see we have Genesis chapter 6, verse 12. Friedman makes an error here and doesn't include this one. So I don't know where he says it should be, but that phrase, it doesn't appear, but the whole thing appears 10 times. You'll notice the last phrase appears right there in Exodus. Love the Lord your God, or love the Lord thy God, your God, 10 times in the Pentateuch. To love the Lord your God, thy God. Again, this is all in Deuteronomy. And really I shouldn't include this because it's all in Deuteronomy, but we're simply showing how this meter appears in other books at this point besides Exodus. And that's just one example that would make this a much longer presentation. Pillar of the cloud, that phrase, pillar of the cloud, exactly 10 times. And we've got the priestly code, the Yahwehs and the Elohis all contributing. Now, individual words will also be in multiples. Here we have the word cloud throughout. Now, this is the entire Pentateuch. The word cloud, 20 times in Exodus. Cloud, 14 times. There are different ways to write these. 14 times in Exodus. Cloud, 20 times in Numbers. Cloud, 14 times in Numbers. And cloud, again, 7 times in Deuteronomy. The word is constant. That word cloud that describes the presence of God in the cloud, that word is in meter everywhere it appears in the various books and various forms in which it's presented. Thus saith the Lord 10 times. That phrase appears exactly 10 times. Thus saith the Lord. And you can see there's little asterisks there. It's a variation on the example, and so we didn't include that because there are these variations. But we're looking for the exact phrase, and there it is 10 times. And notice the last one is completed by the Elohis. To the mountain, usually referring to Sinai, to the mountain. Except we've got there, we have Mount Horeb up there in 3:1, 10 times. First fruits, that phrase, first fruits, and then first fruits, and we're talking about the Lord, 7 times, again, overlapping meters in the same subject. Gather the people, 10 times, gather to the people, 7 times. So we have gathered to the people, and gathered to people. Notice the repetition of and 7 times. So you have 7 inside of a 10, and the whole phrase appears in the whole Pentateuch exactly 10 times. Now, this is rather interesting, unusual. The phrase, anything to do with length, width, and height, and all 3 measurements given. There's one example where you see it right here, it's a smaller type, where all 3 appear, but only 2 measurements are given. When all 3 measurements are given, and you have length, width, and height, and then the number of each of these measurements, that appears exactly 10 times. The first offspring, 10 times, and without and, 7 times. Or Vav would be without and. All the congregation of Israel 20 times in the Pentateuch. To the people 20 times in the Pentateuch. And there you see the various subsets. Said to the people, that's 7 times. Speak to the people, that's 7 times, all within the 20. Other gods, 20 times. Most of those phrases are all in Deuteronomy, but one phrase is up there in Exodus chapter 20, verse 3. And then we have one with the Elohis in 23:13 of Exodus, and all the rest are in Deuteronomy, other gods. So whoever did this, do you think they were aware that they were completing all this? That they had finished off the meter from Exodus and completed it in Deuteronomy to come up with other gods exactly 20 times? From the land of Egypt, that phrase appears in the Pentateuch exactly 50 times. And the Lord spoke unto Moses, saying, that whole phrase, just as it's written, sometimes it's a whole verse by itself in the Pentateuch, that verse, the Lord spoke unto Moses, saying, exactly 70 times in the Pentateuch. Look at the supposed contributions that are added to that in the supposed priestly code. This is a phenomenal array of repetition and perfection. It's all there. All 70 repetitions scattered throughout the Pentateuch. Every one of them is present at the 3,500 years. To the Lord, 40 times. The phrase, to the Lord, exactly 40 times. By the mouth of. Now, we're talking about a certain kind of phrasing with what looks like a hyphen, and here we have 40 times. Dodecadal Meter, 12 times. In all the land of Egypt, exactly 12 times. Tablets of stone, 12 times. 2 tablets of stone, 10 times inside the phrase tablets of stone. So you've got overlapping meter of 10 and 12, or dodecadal and decadal. Orphan and widow, a very interesting phrase, appears only once in Exodus. Exodus 22:22. All the other 11 are all found in Deuteronomy. And other, whoever other is, maybe it's a brother-in-law, somebody came in and added 10 to make the whole thing into Dodecadal Meter. 6 days, 12 times, 6 days, with work, 7 times. A lot of combinations of 7s and 12s, as we saw, 7s and 10s. From on the face of the earth, 12 times. Rings of gold, 12 times. Underneath that, we've got on the tabernacle, also written by, in Exodus, and that one is mostly written by the, here we see this phrase, mostly written by the priestly code, but then along comes the redactor and he adds 5 more of his own, which is rather bizarre. To Abraham and Isaac, 12 times. I'm going to back up on that again. It says to Abraham, to Isaac, and to Jacob. Excuse me, I said Abraham and Isaac. It's to Abraham, to Isaac, and to Jacob. Exactly 12 times. For on the 4, or on the 4, whatever that, why that phrase is used, on the 4. I can't be exactly sure why this is so, but here we have it, and here it is. It appears 12 times. Also, Moses to the Lord, 12 times. Offering to the Lord, 12 times. And the land flowing with milk and honey, 12 times. To you and to you a land flowing with milk and honey, 7 times inside the 12. Take heed to yourselves, 12 times. Anger of the Lord, 12 times. Anger of the Lord kindled 10 times. Anger of the Lord was kindled 7 times. So we have all 3 meters in one example. Now that's a nice introduction to compound meter. Could also be called complex meter. We're looking at the more simplified examples. These are much more complex. Notice the top phrase, the congregation of the sons of Israel 24 times, the congregation of the sons of Israel 14 times, all the congregation of the sons of Israel 20 times, all the congregation of the sons of Israel 7 times, to the congregation of the sons of Israel 7 times, to all the congregation of the sons of Israel 7 times. It's a rather unusual list here. And here you see it's all written out in multiples. Here we have speak to the Lord. Speak to the Lord 21 times. Speak unto the sons of Israel. Speak unto the sons of Israel 21 times. Speak unto the sons of Israel 20 times. Without the introductory, we have an introductory word, as you see in Exodus 31:13. Speak unto the sons of Israel and say unto them 12 times. Speak unto the sons of Israel 12 times in Leviticus, and speak unto the sons of Israel and say to them 7 times in Numbers. Here we have an unusual repetition, 38 times. Now 38 has no Hebraic meter in itself. There's nothing about 38 that matches anything that we're aware of in Hebraic meter, which is repetition of 7s, 10s, and 12s, or multiples thereof. However, within this 38, we find, you'll see, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 different subsets that are all in meter. 1 in 10s, 7s, 21, 14, and 30. Even these little words right here, the Hebrew pei and samech, are in meter. We're going to show the rest of it because it got too long. This is the rest of it. It got too long. Here we're breaking it down as Lord, and here you can see the rest of it. And the pei and the samech are also in meter. Often not printed in any Bible. As the Lord commanded Moses 7 times, as the Lord commanded Moses 10 times. I'm going to back up again to look at the original. Notice it says, as the Lord commanded Moses 38 times, which is not meter in itself, but look at the subsets. Now we're looking at, as the Lord commanded Moses 7 times with pei, as the Lord commanded Moses 10 times with samech, as the Lord commanded Moses without samech or pei 21 times, as the Lord commanded Moses 14 times in the last 2 chapters of Exodus, 12 times with samech or pei, all in Exodus, which the Lord commanded Moses, just that part, 14 times in the Pentateuch, according to all that the Lord commanded Moses 7 times in the Pentateuch. Now we're switching another complex meter. Acacia wood, 24 times. Made or make of acacia wood 21 times. Thou shalt make of acacia wood 10 times. And he made of acacia wood 10 times. Doorway of the tent of meeting 42 times. Now one of the key phrases in this is the tent of meeting itself. It's a reference to the tabernacle. And we have to the doorway of the tent of meeting 20 times as a subset. There it is, doorway of the tent of meeting, no prefix, 20 times Leviticus. Doorway of the tent of meeting, no prefix, 12 times. A screen to or for the doorway, 10 times. Doorway of the tent of meeting, no prefix, 7 times in Exodus. Service of the tent of meeting, 7 times in the Pentateuch. Overlay or overlaid with pure gold, 20 times in the Pentateuch, 14, and then we have 6 of them, well that's not a meter, have overlaid, and then that would create a subdivision of 14. So that would be 20 and 14. There you see the Hebrew. Pure gold, 24 times. Here it is in a chart, a little easier to see, the phrase pure gold exactly 24 times. Place hands on the head, that's usually a sacrifice. Again, this is 18 is not a meter, but inside it we've got 14, and you see we take out the light blue, we've got 14 then, you see that we highlighted that phrase, we take it out and we've got 14. And then that breaks down to Aaron's hands on the head, for 7 times. Here's the Hebrew. We reversed it this time so you can see it a little more plainly in Hebrew. The sons of Aaron, 20 times in the Pentateuch, the sons of Aaron, their hands, the sons of Aaron, their hands, 7 times, the sons, their hands on the head, 7 times. I've got 7s inside of this 20, 2 times. This is a particularly interesting phrase because the sons of Aaron appears, the sons of Aaron, their hands appears 7 times, but on the head of here, that also appears 7 times. So on the head appears by itself 7 times, and the sons of Aaron, their hands, exactly 7 times, and their hands is really not part of that phrase. We got these are 7 and these are 7. And this is a kind of a linking phrase that puts these 2 sets of 7s together. On the head of 10 times. And he lay his hand on the head of 7 times. I'm going to back up. And he shall lay his hand on the head 7 times. By the hand of Moses 7 times. Holy garments for Aaron 7 times. Aaron places his hands on the head of 7 times. Holy garments for Aaron 7 times. The sons of Aaron, the priest, 10 times in the Pentateuch. Upon the altar, around about 14 times, sprinkle blood upon the altar, around about 12 times. Aaron sprinkled the blood upon the altar, around about 7 times in the Pentateuch. Here it is, a little easier to see. Highlighted it so you can see the repetition. Blood and oil, blood or oil, put on the right ear, thumb of the right hand and toe. There's an unusual phrase. Exactly 7 times. 1 time in Exodus, the other 7 times in Leviticus. The altar of whole burnt offering, 14 times, 7 times syncopated. Now, I'm going to explain what I mean by syncopated. Now, here you have that center phrase in Hebrew, the altar of whole burnt offering, right there in the middle. Syncopated right here would be the Hebrew word for et, really, or the direct object, really can't be translated exactly. Here we have it 7 times on the left, 7 times on the right. 10 of them have the Hebrew and or vav. So I've got this phrase right here, 14 times, 7 on the left, 7 on the right, and then 10 inside of that. These combinations are just phenomenal. They continue to illustrate how complex this meter really is. To bear iniquity 20 times, not sure about this one. Do we include the phrase in Genesis or not? My punishment is greater than I can bear, says Cain. And then I've got 20 more times for iniquity. So is it a meter of 20, 3 of dodecadal, double dodecadal? I should say double decadal, excuse me. Or is it 3 times 7? It's a difficult one to decide, so we put it all here. Let's let you see how the arrangement falls. There it is again. And the 2 kidneys and the fat that is upon them, 7 times the Pentateuch. Anointing oil, 21 times the Pentateuch. Anointing oil, sweet incense, 7 times. The oil, 10 times in the Pentateuch. That's the oil with et. Spices 14 times in the Pentateuch. 12 times in the Pentateuch with sweet incense. Shall wash his clothes and bathe himself in water and be unclean until even. We had to make that quite small to get all those words. That phrase appears 10 times. It's not in Exodus at all, but we just included it because it was such a long phrase and highly unusual. I just wanted you to see that one. Cut off from people 21 times. Soul cut off from people 10 times. Cut off from Israel 3 times. 3 from 10 is 7, so that's why we marked it for, that's why we distinguished that. And notice the last phrase is included by the redactor. The whole thing falls apart without the redactor. Supposedly, of course, there was no redactor. The whole thing, the whole division is just absurd. Here it is again. All articles, 30 times in the Pentateuch. 7 begin without and, 20 end with pronoun, 10 end with no pronoun. I am the Lord, 80 times in the Pentateuch. I am the Lord, their God, 30 times in the Pentateuch. I am the Lord, your God, 28 times. 4 times 7 is quadrupled heptadic. Because I am the Lord, their God, 10 times. I am the Lord, their God, 10 times in the Pentateuch. I am the Lord thy God who brought you out of the land of Egypt. 7 times. Of course, the last one is supposedly written by the Deuterist. Most holy, or holy of holies, depending on the context, 24 times in the Pentateuch. It is most holy, 12 times. So I've got a split right in there. How holy to the Lord, 10 times in the Pentateuch. Holy or sanctify the Lord, 12 times in the Pentateuch. It is most holy 12 times in the Pentateuch. Here I just threw in the word gather, which is connected with the name of Joseph, but this is the verb, and it appears exactly 50 times. Ten divisions of the tabernacle. In other words, all the different things, all the different articles. There are 42 divisions, but they're set up into 10 sections for all the items that are in the tabernacle. Blue and purple and scarlet and fine linen, twisted 14 times. Notice this phrase right here. This phrase, reverse on the 7th and the 14th meter. 12 blue and purple and scarlet 12 times, irregular in Exodus. Blue and purple and scarlet and fine linen, twisted 12 times in the Pentateuch. Blue and purple, scarlet 20 times in the Pentateuch. Linen fine twisted 20 times in the Pentateuch, and linen fine twisted 12 times. Here we have those separate, we broke out the words. Scarlet repeats exactly 20 times in Exodus. Scarlet, 7 more variations on the above. And then purple appears 20 times in Exodus, and then we've got 7 more that are variations of the above. And then blue appears 40 times in the Pentateuch. Gold, blue, purple, and fine linen together, 7 times. 20 from 20 years old and upward, 21 times. The first 2 are in Exodus, notice. From 20 years old and upward, all that were able to go to war, 14 times. The following 3 verses repeat 10 times in the Pentateuch. Now, we're not going to publish them, they're too long. Here we have it, and they're all in Numbers, again, not in Exodus, but that phrase, by their generation, after their families, by the house of their fathers, according to the number of the names from 20 years old and upward, all that were able to go to war. That entire verse is repeated exactly 10 times in Numbers. Of course, you kind of expect this in Numbers, because look at the name of the book, but it's the same character as the rest of the entire Pentateuch. He made 20 times in the Pentateuch. All of these phrases are only in Exodus. The phrase, and he made, exactly 20 times. And here we have it in Hebrew. And the phrase, the tent of meeting, appears 99 times, but there's one more from the tent of meeting, and there I get to an even 100. To do all 12 times in the Pentateuch. Thus they did 12 times the Pentateuch, with samach or pay 7 times. Did so 14 times. You shall not do 30 times. You shall do no laborious work 12 times. Look at the redactor supposedly contributing that. That's absurd. You shall have a holy convocation 10 times. Again, the redactor involved. Ridiculous. You shall have a holy convocation or assembly. You shall do no laborious work. In other words, those two phrases put together we just looked at, they appear together exactly 7 times. And I'm just showing this as just a view of Hebrew. In the end of the Exodus chapter 40, there's a kind of a flourish where this phrase, you can see this phrase right here, repeats exactly 7 times, and this introduction to take appears exactly right there 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 times. And now we're closing with an example of just individual words in a Hebraic meter in Exodus that span out outside of Exodus. These words appear all in a Hebraic meter. These are Decadal, 7 times, 14 times, and 21 times. Here's Dodecadal, 10 times, 40 times, 30 times. Here's more of them, 20 times, 100 times for gate, door open. And there was gather. That was 50 times. And here we have hook, length, manna 10 times. And he said exactly 140 times. All these are in Shechem, to rise up early. They have different meanings for the same word 40 times. Here we have more of the same. Once again, Sinai appears 30 times, stretch 50 times, or stretch out your hand. In the wilderness, this phrase right here, in the wilderness, exactly 60 times. Here we have examples of Dodecadal meter, of multiples and 12s. And here we have compound, this is 17, these are 10s and 7s. And herewith now we conclude our examination of Hebraic meter in the book of Exodus. We know this was a rather quick examination. We certainly didn't expect you to be able to follow all this. It's rather lengthy. You might turn this video on and off again just to take a rest from what's all in here. But we wanted this to be a video of record. In other words, how much is actually in one particular book. So this was an intensive study. Took about 2 years to put together, examining all the meter we could find. This doesn't mean it's all the meter there is. There's probably much more. We just don't know how to find it or how to recognize it. But here we found you just went through over 200 examples of Hebraic meter according to Cassuto's theory of multiples of 10, 7s, and 12s interwoven throughout the entire book of Exodus. It would be utterly impossible to have this kind of meter if you have 5 different groups separated by 500 years, all working on this independently and coming up with this kind of unity of meter, and they're each working on the same meter. So this book is available here again, and you're invited to purchase from this location. And in the book, we'll obviously explain, how the meter is found and give a lot more information about how the whole process came into being and what it took to find all this. Thank you for your time and witnessing the first presentation of its kind of Hebraic meter, and this is a video for the record that others can use it as a catalog source by going through this video at their leisure. Thank you.